In the towering glass mansion of Alexander Gray, the reclusive billionaire, laughter was rare, except when it came from trouble. His 6-year-old triplets were infamous in the city's elite circles, not for charm, but for chaos. No maid lasted more than a week. Some fled in tears within hours. The rumors painted them as untamable. But when fate placed Emma Carter, a widowed single mother with her own quiet storms, at their doorstep, everything began to shift. What Alexander didn't know was that Emma wasn't afraid of storms. She'd survived her own, and the triplets were about to meet their match. The Gray estate didn't just sit on the hill, it ruled it. Tall iron gates guarded a winding drive lined with ancient oaks, their branches twisting above like a cathedral's arches. The mansion itself was an expanse of glass and stone, each window reflecting the pale autumn sky. From a distance, it looked perfect, untouched by time, untouched by trouble. Inside, trouble had been very busy. 3 small hurricanes, identical in face but different in mischief, had driven away 7 nannies in less than a year. 7 women, each claiming to have seen it all, had fled the moment they realized these boys were not ordinary children. And now a new candidate was arriving. Emma Lewis tightened her grip on the steering wheel as the gates opened before her. Her old sedan coughed slightly as it rolled up the pristine driveway, its worn tires crunching over gravel so clean it could have been polished. Her son, Oliver, was at school. She'd made sure of that. This job was important, maybe more important than she wanted to admit. She parked at the side, stepping out into the cool air. The scent of damp leaves and freshly cut grass surrounded her. She smoothed the wrinkles from her coat, trying not to think about how out of place she looked against the sleek cars in the drive. The front door opened before she could knock. A tall man in a dark suit stood there, not smiling, not frowning, just observing. His eyes, the color of steel, flicked over her like a scanner. "Miss Lewis." "Yes." She offered a small, professional smile. "I'm Alexander Gray," he said, his voice deep, measured. "Come in." The foyer was the size of her entire apartment. Marble floors stretched toward a grand staircase, where a woman in her 60s was dusting the banister with brisk precision. "This is Mrs. Hargrove, our housekeeper," Alexander said. "She knows this place better than anyone." Mrs. Hargrove gave a polite nod. "Pleasure. Though I'll warn you, it's not me you need to impress." Before Emma could ask what she meant, there was a noise from above, the unmistakable sound of running feet. 3 boys appeared at the top of the staircase, identical down to the unruly brown hair and sharp blue eyes. Each wore a different colored sweater, green, red, and navy. They didn't walk down the stairs. They slid, on cushions. Mrs. Hargrove sighed. Alexander's jaw tightened. Emma blinked. When they landed, one of them, the boy in green, looked straight at her. "You're the new one?" "I might be," she said evenly. "Depends on how today goes." The boy in red smirked. "They never last." Alexander cleared his throat. "Boys, this is Miss Lewis. She may be helping out here for a while. Ethan, Evan, and Eli." She learned their names quickly, though it was obvious they enjoyed confusing people. Looked her over like she was a substitute teacher they planned to test. "We have rules," said the one in navy. "Oh," Emma arched an eyebrow. "And what are those?" "No rules," said the boy in green, grinning. Mrs. Hargrove muttered something about saints and patience before disappearing into the kitchen. For the first hour, Emma followed the boys through their routine. Routine was a generous word. It involved half-finished homework, an attempted escape to the treehouse before lunch, and a dramatic sword fight with cardboard tubes that nearly knocked over a very expensive vase. She didn't raise her voice once. When the tube battle got too close to the vase, she stepped between them, took the swords, and declared they were now dragon-hunting tools, to be used outside only. They blinked at her. Most adults either yelled or gave up. Lunch was another test. Mrs. Hargrove served grilled cheese and tomato soup. Ethan insisted on cutting his sandwich into perfect triangles. Evan declared he wouldn't eat anything that touched red stuff. Eli tried to sneak his crusts into the dog's mouth. Emma didn't argue. She cut Ethan's sandwich, moved Evan's soup to a separate bowl, and told Eli the dog was allergic to crusts. A lie that worked surprisingly well. By the end of lunch, the boys were studying her with a kind of wary curiosity. After lunch came quiet time, though nothing about it was quiet. Emma found them in the library, a stunning room with floor-to-ceiling shelves, building a fort out of antique chairs and velvet throws. Instead of dismantling it, she joined in. "If we're making a fort," she said, "we need a guard at the door, and a password." That got their attention. Within minutes, the fort had an elaborate entrance system, a secret knock, and an official treasure chest, an empty biscuit tin. For the first time all day, the sound in the house was not chaos. It was laughter. Alexander returned earlier than expected. Emma was sitting cross-legged on the library floor, holding court as the boys told wild stories about their fort kingdom. She looked up to see him in the doorway, watching. His gaze lingered on the boys, smiling, animated, then shifted to her. There was something there she couldn't quite read. "Boys," he said, "it's time to get ready for dinner." They groaned but obeyed, disappearing upstairs. Alexander stepped into the room. "You've survived your first day." Emma gave a small shrug. "I've had worse. Most don't last past lunch." "I'm not most," she said simply. As she left that evening, Mrs. Hargrove caught her at the door. "They're warming to you," she said in a low voice. "Don't let them scare you off. They need someone who won't run at the first sign of trouble." Emma smiled faintly. "Lucky for them, Trouble and I are old friends." She walked down the steps, the autumn air crisp against her cheeks. Somewhere behind her, through one of those tall windows, she saw 3 small faces peeking out, watching her go. For the first time in a long time, Emma had a feeling this job might not just change her life. It might change theirs too. The next morning, Emma stood in her small kitchen, pouring coffee into a travel mug while Oliver munched on toast at the table. "Are you nervous?" he asked, crumbs clinging to his chin. Emma smiled, though her stomach fluttered. "Maybe a little. It's only my second day." Oliver tilted his head. "You said the boys are my age?" "A little older," she said. "And they're energetic. That's code for trouble, isn't it?" Emma laughed. "Eat your breakfast." The gray estate looked different in the morning light. The sun filtered through the oaks, casting golden pools across the driveway. A gardener was trimming hedges, and the scent of fresh mulch lingered in the air. Mrs. Hargrove greeted her at the door. "Brace yourself," she murmured, eyes twinkling. "They've been up since 6. She found the triplets in the kitchen, where chaos had apparently replaced breakfast. Ethan was trying to pour cereal from a box half his size. Evan was arguing with Eli over the last banana. The dog, a golden retriever named Max, was stationed under the table, tail wagging in anticipation of falling food. "Morning," Emma said, setting her bag down. 3 heads turned. "You came back," Ethan said, sounding almost surprised. "I said I would," Emma replied. "Now, who's going to help me make pancakes?" The next hour was a whirlwind of flour, sticky fingers, and arguments over whose turn it was to stir the batter. Emma didn't mind. She assigned each boy a job. Ethan measured, Evan stirred, and Eli set the table, though half the forks ended up pointing the wrong way. By the time the pancakes were ready, the kitchen smelled of vanilla and syrup. Even Mrs. Hargrove paused to snag one from the stack. Alexander appeared just as the boys were digging in. He wore a dark suit, crisp and immaculate, but his tie was slightly askew, as if the morning had been as hectic for him as it had for them. His gaze swept the table. "You're feeding them sugar before school? They're also getting fruit," Emma said, gesturing to a bowl of sliced strawberries. "Besides, pancakes aren't just food. They're a peace treaty." One corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. After breakfast, Emma herded the boys upstairs to get ready for school. This turned into another test of her patience. Ethan claimed he couldn't find his shoes, which were under his bed. Evan insisted his sweater was too itchy and tried to negotiate wearing his favorite t-shirt instead. Eli decided now was the perfect time to show her his rock collection. Emma didn't yell. She coaxed, bargained, and finally set a 5-minute, getting ready timer that turned the process into a race. Miraculously, it worked. By the time they were out the door, backpacks in place, Alexander was waiting by the car. He watched the boys climb in before turning to Emma. "They listen to you," he said, almost as if testing the words. "They'll listen to anyone who listens to them first," Emma replied. He studied her for a moment, then nodded and got into the car. With the boys at school, Emma spent the late morning getting to know the house. It wasn't just big. It was layered like a storybook castle. There were formal rooms no one seemed to use, and hidden corners that felt warm and lived in. The library drew her in again. She ran her fingers over the spines of books that looked untouched for decades. She could almost imagine the boys in here on a rainy day, building forts or reading adventure stories. Mrs. Hargrove found her there. "Don't get too comfortable," she said. "They'll be home in a few hours, and you'll need your energy." The calm ended exactly at 3:15, when the sound of the front door opening was followed by a burst of noise. The boys tumbled inside, talking over each other. Ethan waved a paper in the air. "I got an A on my spelling test. Max ate part of my lunch," Evan announced. Eli simply handed her a folded piece of construction paper. Inside was a drawing of a woman with long hair, a blue dress, and 3 stick-figure boys. In uneven letters, it read, "Miss Emma." Her throat tightened. "This is beautiful, Eli. Thank you." The afternoon was supposed to be homework time. Emma sat up at the kitchen table, helping Ethan with math while Evan worked on a science project and Eli practiced writing. It was going smoothly until Ethan's pencil broke. Somehow, that tiny mishap spiraled into a full-blown argument between the boys over who had taken whose eraser. Emma didn't scold. She leaned back in her chair and waited. When they noticed she wasn't engaging, the fight fizzled. "Are you mad?" Evan asked cautiously. "No," she said. "I just don't want to talk to angry people. If you want my help, you have to talk to me calmly." It was such a simple rule, but it worked. Within minutes, they were back to work. By late afternoon, the house smelled faintly of cookies, the result of another team project in the kitchen. Alexander came home to find the boys proudly offering him a plate. He raised an eyebrow. "These don't look like the ones Mrs. Hargrove usually makes." "That's because we made them," Ethan said. "Miss Emma helped." Alexander took a bite. "They're good." The boys grinned like they just won an award. That evening, after the boys were in their pajamas, Emma read them a story. She chose one with adventure and mystery, voices and sound effects. Ethan leaned against her arm. Evan sprawled on the rug, and Eli curled up with Max at his feet. When she closed the book, they begged for another chapter. She glanced at the clock, then gave in, just one more. By the time Alexander came to check on them, all 3 were half asleep. "You'll spoil them," he said quietly as they stepped into the hallway. Emma smiled. "Maybe, but some kids need a little spoiling." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes, before nodding. "Good night, Miss Lewis." As she drove home, Emma realized something had shifted. The boys were still testing her, but less like they wanted her gone, and more like they were checking to see if she'd keep showing up. And she would. For now, at least she would. The next morning, a soft drizzle hung in the air, misting the grounds of the gray estate. The garden glistened with raindrops, and the faint scent of wet earth seeped in through the kitchen windows. Emma arrived with her umbrella tucked under one arm, shaking off the cool dampness as Mrs. Hargrove handed her a steaming mug of tea. "They're in the playroom," Mrs. Hargrove said with a small smile. "Already plotting something, I suspect." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Always." The playroom was a sprawling space at the far end of the house, part toy shop, part battlefield. Wooden train tracks snaked across the floor. A fort made from blankets and couch cushions towered in the middle. 3 sets of eyes peeked out from inside as she stepped in. "You're late," Ethan declared. "It's 9:05, she said, glancing at her watch. "I think that counts as on time." Evan whispered something to Eli, and the 2 burst into giggles. "All right," Emma said, dropping her bag on the sofa. "What's the plan this morning?" Eli's hand shot up. "We're making an obstacle course. But not for us, for Max." Max, the ever-enthusiastic golden retriever, bounded into the room at the mention of his name. He wagged his tail furiously, nearly knocking over a stack of blocks. Emma crouched down. "You're sure he's up for it?" Ethan grinned. "He loves it. We tested it yesterday." Her eyes flicked to the scattered pillows, upturned chairs, and suspiciously placed laundry baskets. "I can see that." The next hour turned into an exercise in patience and laughter. The boys took turns designing levels of the obstacle course, each more elaborate than the last. Emma found herself jogging alongside Max, cheering him through tunnels and over tiny jumps made from broomsticks. For the first time since she'd met them, the triplets worked together without bickering. Evan encouraged Ethan. Eli offered to reset the blocks when Max knocked them over. "You're a good team," Emma said as they collapsed on the rug. Ethan shrugged, a little embarrassed. Sometimes. After lunch, they settled in the library. The boys had decided they wanted to help Emma find a new book to read to them that night. Evan wandered toward the tall ladder, eyeing it like a mountain climber. "Can I?" "No," Emma said firmly before he could finish. "You'll fall and I'll be in trouble." He pouted but obeyed, flipping through a book on dinosaurs instead. Eli handed her a worn copy of The Secret Garden. "This one's about a place that's hidden and special." Emma smiled. "I like the sound of that." When the rain let up in the afternoon, Emma suggested a walk in the garden. The boys groaned at first, until Max came trotting to the door, leash in mouth. They wandered down the gravel paths, past manicured hedges and rows of roses still dotted with rain. The air smelled clean, fresh, and faintly sweet. "This is where Mom liked to sit," Ethan said suddenly, pointing to a wrought iron bench under an old oak tree. His voice was softer than usual. Emma glanced at him, careful not to press. "It's beautiful here." She liked reading outside, Evan added. Eli just nodded, eyes on the ground. Emma felt the weight of their silence. They'd given her a glimpse into something fragile, and she wasn't going to break it by asking too much. That evening, homework was unusually smooth. Ethan breezed through his math. Evan completed his science notes without complaint. Eli wrote a short story about a dog who could talk and solve mysteries. When Alexander came home, he found the four of them at the table, laughter spilling out as Eli read his story aloud. "What's going on here?" Alexander asked, setting his briefcase down. "Storytime," Emma said. "Apparently Max is a detective now." Max, hearing his name, barked once, as if in agreement. Later, after the boys were in bed, Emma was gathering her things when Alexander appeared in the doorway. "They seem different," he said, his tone cautious. "In a good way, I hope," she replied. He nodded slowly. "They talk more, laugh more." Emma hesitated. "They're great kids, Alexander. They just need someone to meet them where they are." His eyes lingered on her for a moment. Maybe so. The following days slipped into a rhythm. Morning pancakes or cereal, walks in the garden or rainy day forts, homework, snacks, bedtime stories. One afternoon, Emma arrived to find the boys in the driveway with skateboards. Ethan zipped past her with a whoop, followed by Evan, who wobbled dangerously before regaining balance. "Where's your helmet?" Emma called. Evan groaned but went to fetch it. Eli approached her quietly. "Can you watch me? I'm not good yet." She crouched to his level. "Everyone starts somewhere. Let's see what you can do." He made it 5 feet before hopping off, but the smile on his face was pure victory. That evening, Emma noticed something else. The way Alexander lingered in the kitchen while they baked cookies, or how he listened from the doorway during story time. He didn't say much, but his presence was warmer, less guarded. Once, as she was tucking the boys in, she heard him murmur, "Good night, troublemakers." Before switching off the light, the boys grinned in the dark. One Friday night, they convinced her to let them camp in the living room. Blankets draped over chairs became tense. A fake campfire, made from a flashlight and orange tissue paper, flickered between them. Ethan told a ghost story so ridiculous it made Evan snort milk from his nose. Eli, ever the quiet one, handed out marshmallows he'd stashed from the pantry. When Alexander walked in and saw the scene, he just shook his head. But there was a smile tugging at his lips. Emma caught his eye. "We're building memories." He didn't argue. By the end of that week, something had undeniably shifted. The boys didn't just accept her presence now, they sought it out. Ethan asked her to help with a school project. Evan wanted her opinion on his drawing. Eli, in his shy way, left little paper notes on her bag. "Hi, Miss Emma. Max likes you best. Thank you for the pancakes." Emma tucked each one into her wallet. As she drove home that Friday night, the streetlights blurring in the rain, she realized she'd crossed an invisible line. She wasn't just the new nanny. She was part of their world now. And leaving would be harder than she'd ever imagined. The Gray estate was unusually quiet that morning. The sun filtered gently through the sheer curtains, scattering gold across the polished floors. Somewhere in the distance, the soft hum of a vacuum drifted down the hallway. Max, the ever-faithful golden retriever, padded alongside Emma as she made her way to the kitchen. But something felt off. Mrs. Hargrove was bustling at the counter, arranging a tray of tea and biscuits. "They're upstairs with their father," she said when Emma asked. "All three of them?" Emma frowned. "That's rare." Mrs. Hargrove's eyes softened. "It's been a hard morning." Emma climbed the grand staircase, each creak echoing in the stillness. She found the triplets in Alexander's study, a room lined with dark wood shelves and soft leather chairs. Ethan sat slouched in one chair, Evan leaned against the desk, and Eli sat on the floor with Max's head in his lap. Alexander stood by the window, one hand in his pocket, staring out at the garden. "What's going on?" Emma asked gently. No one answered at first. Then Ethan muttered, "It's Mom's birthday." Emma's chest tightened. "I didn't know," she said softly, glancing at Alexander. His gaze didn't leave the window. "We usually keep it quiet. The boys like to spend it together." Emma stepped closer. "Would you like to do something for her? To remember her?" Evan shifted uncomfortably. "We used to make cupcakes with her. Chocolate ones," Eli added, his voice small. Emma knelt down beside them. "Then that's what we'll do. Not just any cupcakes, the best chocolate cupcakes in the city. What do you say?" The kitchen soon filled with the sounds of clinking bowls, the hum of the mixer, and bursts of laughter when flour accidentally dusted Evan's hair. Ethan took charge of measuring. Evan handled the eggs, with only one shell casualty. And Eli carefully stirred the batter like it was liquid gold. Even Alexander, after much coaxing, joined in, though his first attempt at piping frosting earned a round of giggles from his sons. "Looks more like a mountain than a swirl," Ethan teased. "Creativity is a sign of genius," Alexander replied dryly, but there was a hint of a smile. When the cupcakes were ready, Emma set them out on a tiered tray. She lit a single candle in the center cupcake. "For Mom," Eli whispered. The four of them stood around the table, the candle flickering between them. Alexander's voice was quiet but steady as he said, "She would have loved this." They each took a cupcake, and for a few minutes, the only sound was the clink of forks and the occasional contented sigh. That afternoon, Emma suggested they take a walk to the garden bench the boys had shown her before, the one where their mother used to sit. They brought a thermos of hot chocolate, a blanket, and Max trotting happily behind. Ethan carried a small photo frame. Inside was a picture of their mother, smiling with her arms around all three boys. "She was really pretty," Emma said, sitting beside them. "She was," Alexander agreed quietly. His eyes softened as he looked at the photo, a shadow of grief passing through them. The boys told Emma stories about how their mother used to make up bedtime songs, how she danced in the kitchen on Saturday mornings, how she never cared if it rained because rain is just the sky giving us a hug. Emma listened, storing each detail like a precious gem. When they headed back, she noticed Alexander walking a step behind, his gaze fixed on the ground. For the first time, she wondered how much he carried alone. The weeks that followed wove themselves into something steady and warm. Emma became part of the family's rhythms. Morning routines, school drop-offs, late-night emergency hot chocolate runs. The triplets grew bolder in their affection. Ethan would high-five her before bed. Evan started sketching her alongside Max in his drawings, and Eli would sneak into the kitchen to help her with dinner, humming softly. Even Alexander's walls had begun to crack. She'd catch him watching her sometimes, an unreadable expression in his eyes. One rainy evening, the power went out. The estate was thrown into darkness, the only light coming from the storm flashing outside. Flashlights, Emma called, and the boys scrambled to fetch them. They ended up in the living room, wrapped in blankets while Emma told them ghost stories, though hers were more silly than scary. Alexander appeared in the doorway, holding a tray with mugs of tea. He set it down, took a seat beside her, and for the first time joined in one of her stories. The boys hung on every word. When the storm passed, the boys drifted to sleep in their blanket fort. Emma started to stand, but Alexander's voice stopped her. "Stay a minute." She sat back down. "I don't say it enough," he began, his tone low. "But thank you for being here for them." She met his gaze. "They're great kids. They just needed someone to see them." "And you?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "What do you need, Emma?" She hesitated. "I'm still figuring that out." In the days leading up to the boys' school recital, the house buzzed with excitement. They practiced lines, rehearsed songs, and insisted Emma sit front row. The night of the recital, Alexander drove them all to the auditorium. The triplets spotted Emma in the crowd and waved wildly from the stage. When it was over, they rushed into her arms. "Did you see?" Ethan exclaimed. "You were amazing," she said, hugging them tight. Alexander stood beside her, his hand brushing against hers as the boys chattered. Neither of them moved away. One Saturday morning, Alexander asked her to join them for a charity event downtown, a fundraiser his company hosted annually. She hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," he said simply. The event was grand, with glittering lights, music, and a sea of well-dressed guests. Emma felt out of place at first, but the triplets clung to her side, proudly introducing her to people. "She's the best nanny in the world," Ethan told one executive. "She makes better pancakes than Dad," Evan added. "She reads the voices in books," Eli finished. Alexander just smiled, looking at her in a way that made her chest tighten. That night, as she was leaving, Alexander walked her to her car. "They're right, you know," he said. "You are part of this family." Emma smiled faintly. "I'm glad you think so." He took a step closer. "I don't just think so. I know so." This time, when their eyes met, neither of them looked away. The space between them dissolved, and his hand found hers. And in that quiet, starlit moment, Emma realized she hadn't just tamed 3 wild-hearted boys. She'd found a place where her own heart could finally rest. That night, as she was leaving, Alexander walked her to her car. "They're right, you know," he said. "You are part of this family." Emma smiled faintly. "I'm glad you think so." He took a step closer. "I don't just think so. I know so." This time, when their eyes met, neither of them looked away. The space between them dissolved, and his hand found hers. And in that quiet, starlit moment, Emma realized she hadn't just tamed 3 wild-hearted boys. She'd found a place where her own heart could finally rest.